All right, so Trey, what inspired you to go back and start reading all of George R. R. Martin's other work? What was on your mind that made you want to do this?
Well, okay, so part of it is like over the past like couple of years, because your Thousand Worlds book club definitely convinced me to read a lot of the Thousand Worlds stuff at the very least.
Mm,
And then I don't know, I kind of like learned to love, I don't know, or not love, but really like George R. R. Martin as a writer, even outside of A Song of Ice and Fire, and then also
mm.
he's not making any A Song of Ice and Fire, so it's like okay, I'm still
Yeah,
hungry for writing, for
it's
reading
funny.
stuff.
It's funny because like George R. R. Martin, I there's definitely obviously similarities between old George R. R. Martin and new George R. R. Martin, but there is something very edgy and rough and imperfect about old George R. R. Martin. That's almost it's hyper emotional. It's very in your face. Uh, people cuss a lot more. There's a lot more sex. Like it's not that George like A Song of Ice and Fire doesn't have that, but A Song of Ice and Fire is so polished, and like his early
Right.
stuff is so kind of rough. But it's weird. It's kind of interesting.
And it's like oddly vulnerable at points too. It's
Oh,
like,
really? Yeah,
yeah.
really honest and vulnerable. Like more so
Oh,
than most writers. I think that's almost the appeal of it as well. Is like it's so
yeah.
honest. Um, but yeah, but at the same time, it like he's also like not traditionally as good as he is like later. Like his conversations are clunkier. He does a lot more tell not show. Um,
Oh, yeah.
like he'll use a lot of like things that people kind of go, oh, you shouldn't use adverbs, you should show not tell. And well, he uses plenty of adverbs in his early work or whatever. um it's the little things like
His
that.
one thing, and I'll talk about this when we get into like my least favorite, is like his he didn't know how to perfect like endings. Cause like the thing with George, and a lot of people don't really know this because like they don't see George finishing stuff because they only know A Song of Ice and Fire. Like
Yeah,
George R. R. Martin's like he knows how to end a story. Like
yeah,
he's good at endings, like especially like he does a lot of like twist endings,
yes, that
but
make
that they
you like
make sense.
that surprise you and make you rethink the whole story and really punch you in the gut. It's actually the one thing I told him when I met him was like, you're so good at endings. And like no one knows that like your greatest strength is actually endings. And it's like but and I think he said like, thank you. I hope people will like the ending I have like coming, or whatever. I think he said something
Oh,
like that. But I was like, oh my god, like you're so good at endings. Like I told him that. But um
and he's good at it in a weird way where like they're disappointing. Like what did I write? I wrote something down here that they're like ambiguous and disappointing, like almost
mhm.
always. Like
Oh
whenever there's
yeah.
like an announce, like this big epic showdown or something like that, that
Right.
never happens, and something else
You're
happens
expecting
instead.
something really great, and instead he gives you something weird and melancholy and unexpected, but also like very emotional and raw. And so I think
Hmm.
like even though it's a disappointment, but because you're feeling something so like emotional, you're like, oh, well, I guess that's even better. Like, oh,
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
know.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's weird, weird stuff like that. Like I kind of
And
the example I kind of go to because it's kind of one of the more obvious ones is Nightflyers. Like Nightflyers is this story where everyone is searching for the Vulcan, and you want to
mm,
find out what the Vulcan is. And the whole story is kind of marching towards like, what is the Vulcan? All the characters are obsessed with what is the Vulcan. And then
what is it going to
it
tell us? What is it going to
right.
reveal about
How is it
our
gonna
the universe?
affect, yeah, humanity? All these different stories that all these different civilizations have on the Vulcan. Like like they all have their different tales. What's the truth? And you're obsessed with like what's gonna happen. And then the story ends up becoming like a horror story of the guy's cross gender mom trapped in the computer, like killing off the crow. And then like
Telepathic.
right. And then you find out the Vulcan is nothing, that it's just like a big floating animal. And then but at the same time, like the impact end of the story is Melantha Jurl is like decides that she needs to dedicate her life from then on to protecting like Royd, and taking care of him, which is like a complete shift and change in her character. And so you have this like big emotional ending with Melantha Jurl that's quite impactful. But like it's amazing that the actual story of like what is the Vulcan is a huge fucking letdown.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, he does the like, and yeah. So as it was like, I was talking about like his endings and how like good his endings are. Um, and I was gonna talk about like how like some of my least favorites are ones where he hasn't figured out how to write endings, where they're little stinkers. They're kind of like, oh, that's fucking sucked.
So Trey put together a list of pretty much every short story that we could remember with
And it's
George.
hard. It's like I was surprised that nobody else had really done it. Somebody did it with the Thousand Worlds ones,
Mm,
and then you can find his Wikipedia page has like a bibliography of all, and it's incomplete. There's a lot of missing gaps and stuff.
yeah.
Um, so like I pieced together a whole bunch, and there's I don't know. He released them weird. A lot of them are hard to find now too.
I had one fan who like also became super obsessed and wanted to track down every story, and I think he did, and he sent me a copy of every story because I was tracking down. This is way back because my channel's been going for a while, but I remember like when I started the Thousand Worlds book club, and I was like, I'm gonna try to find all of George R. R. Martin's like stories. I really thought that okay, it's like whatever the year is like 2014, 2015. The internet's been around for a while, and George R. R. Martin is huge. Like I thought that all of these stories would be online somewhere, and
Mm.
they were not. Like
They're
it
not.
was really really hard. I had to order like old books, and then like type them in, like the
Oh my
stories,
god.
like online, finding these old like magazines that he wrote in the 70s. And so you can now find a lot of them online, but that's it's kind of my doing, and it's all copyright violations for me doing this. I'm sorry. but like
No,
if you're finding the stuff online, it's probably because like I introduced it online. Not
yes.
everything, but like most
No,
of
I
it.
the way that I read a good chunk of it because I've read like 50 out of the 70, 80-ish that are
Mm,
this or that he's ever written. And like a good like maybe half of that was me illegitimately either like reading it because like a fan posted it, probably
yeah.
you, or maybe you, allegedly you, copyright, or there was a website that had all the audiobooks
Mhm.
illegally on there as well. Like so you had
Yeah,
Roy
and
Dutrice.
weirdly, a lot of them I found a lot of them on because Russians tend to be into a lot of sci-fi. I found a lot of the stories on like old like weird Russian like websites. Like
Oh my
it's really
god.
quite kind of funny. But I did have a fan who did do a lot of dedication, like, and got and sent me like his like nearly everything. I think the ones missing from him as well as I think the the wild card stories he doesn't have in, but he has pretty much everything else. Um,
Mm.
but what you gonna do? Can't
George probably doesn't even like some of these because
Right
was
there, and
it
there
Nobody
there's
Leaves New
also a few
Vicksburg he
crazy tales
hates?
like his fan fiction stories when he's like in high school. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
necessarily have all of those. I have a few of them, but you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think this first one is one of those. Only Kids Are Afraid of the Dark.
yeah, that is.
667.
And
Yeah.
he the reason that one is around is because he decided to reprint that
Mint.
one in Dream Songs, his own
Yeah.
collection, his own but yeah, he has a bunch of others about like superhero skiers and stuff, and stuff like that, and I mean they're not that like I don't know. I mean, they're interesting in the sense that it's George R. R. Martin, but the style isn't at all similar. It doesn't tell you anything about Ice and Fire. Like, at some point you're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, I
Because that's
mean,
part of the reason I wanted to read this stuff is to learn about a song. Like, how does George think? How does George
yeah.
write? What is his morals and themes? And because also he does like copy paste characters at some points.
He does copy
Um,
paste characters and he does copy paste lines. Like there's definitely
yeah.
lines that you come across where you're like, oh, he wrote that and he clearly thought that was a cool sounding line and then he borrowed it later. Like Winter is Coming.
There's so much in Fevre Dream of that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, winter is
Oh
coming in Seven Times Never Kill Man.
yeah, or and the night is dark and full of terrors is from In the House of the
Uh,
Worm, or it's um it's an old dream is from Fast Friends, but he says it's
fast.
he says it's a common it was it was a common dream, and then he like lists the dream that the guy's having, and you're like, oh, like I know this sounds very simple, like, and maybe it's a coincidence, but you're like, no, because George has actually said in his writing, like, oh, I keep everything, and
Oh yeah.
you know
Or like Damon Julian, he has like his like kind of like catchphrases is like like that'll be amusing, and it's like, oh, that's like Vargo Hoat. He
oh
says
yeah,
amusing.
absolutely,
Yeah, yeah. I was like,
yeah,
oh, there you go. There's all these like bits that you're like, wow, this little bit of characters like been taken and spliced over. It's
yeah,
interesting to read. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and I mean, I think I think the biggest and most obvious is the character from Under Siege being Tyrion. I think that's one of the time traveling dwarf in that story is just
Mm.
so utterly Tyrion. Or like Annalyn from In the House of the Worm is so utterly Jamie, and things like that. Um, I'm sure he'd probably deny it all.
No, but and I get it. Like it's hard to come up with like original. I don't know material if you've been writing for so long too, because like I didn't realize just how many stories he had written. He's just crazy.
Mm,
Um, by the way,
yeah.
did you notice that I included did you notice in 2013 what I included on this list? Because it was included on his Wikipedia bibliography.
The wit and wisdom of Tyrion Lannister. That's ridiculous. He didn't write that.
It was on his Wikipedia. It says that he's a writer. It said he was the author
I'm
of
sure
it.
they had to credit him so he'd get money or something. Because you're taking lines from the books and being like, well, that was clever. Plop
I
that in
like to
his.
believe he was personally consulted. He picked them out himself.
Oh
Oh
jeez.
gosh. Okay, so what I've brought you here today
Okay.
to ask you. I was curious to know because I've been reading a whole bunch of these lately, chipping away, and I was curious to know what were your I don't know. Do you have some most favorite and or least favorite of these non A Song of Ice and Fire stories? Because most people have never read these. Is like the thing. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so I feel like nobody's gonna have a strong opinion on a lot of these.
Um, so I'll tell you, um, the ones and these have to be like the ones I kind of remember, because and then the ones like I think the ones that are really good are ones that like have a really emotional ending that I kind of like that I remember and resonate with me. Like there's some of them that I read and I just thought about the stories for days. They were that good. And
Oh
then
yeah.
there's ones that it's very clear he had one single idea that wasn't even a very good idea. And he was just like writing a filler story to get to that one little idea. And and it's just throwaway. Now, what's funny is that he kind of realizes what stories are good and what stories are bad. And like, so when you get his collection Dream Songs, those are mostly his good stories. And so when I
Mm.
went searching for his other works and you find it, and you're like, oh, I found another George R. Martin story, and then you read it and you're like, oh, there's a reason why this was lost. Like no one cares because this is no good.
I like how you say that because that is 100% how I feel about the stinkers. That's how I feel about
Yeah.
the stinkers.
It
We're
took
like,
it took
yeah, like
forever to find them, and then you find them and they're like, "Oh, there's a reason why this one was tossed away." Um so for instance, one of my least favorite stories of George R. R. Martin is actually this one called FTA.
okay, I've not read that one. That's one of the few I've not read yet.
It's very short.
Okay.
And I'll spoil the whole thing for you.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
forget even what FTA stands for, because FTL is faster than light, and that story is about faster than light travel, or it's about
yeah.
so it's about subspace and how, in science fiction everybody talks about like subspace or hyperspace. They all talk about how, like, oh well, we can't get from here to there because information and the speed of light can't go beyond a certain limit, but we can get around it by finding subspace. And so he
Mm,
has this story where this one professor is like is almost on the verge of discovering subspace, and it seems like there's a conspiracy at his university about it, and they're like, don't pursue it, man, don't. And he like spends this time, and then finally they set him aside and they're like, look, we told you not to pursue this, and the reason is, no, it's true, there is subspace, and there is like a second dimension. And he's like, oh my god, this is incredible. And they're like, yeah, the problem is, um it's not faster than regular space, it's slower.
That's so dumb.
Right. Like, okay, I get the irony of it, that we all think like subspace would be faster, like intuitively. But he's like, what if subspace were actually slower? That's the end. Like, that's the end of the fuck. That's it. Like, wah, wah.
Oh
Like,
my god, I feel that same way. I'll say one of my least favorite. This is bottom of the barrel. This is one of my least favorite.
okay.
Um, A Peripheral Affair, 1973.
Um, is this and I'm forgetting about peripheral. Is that the football game, or is that a different
No,
one?
that's the last super.
That's
Well,
Run to
there's two
Starlight.
football games.
That's
Yeah,
Run to
there's two
Starlight.
football games.
Oh god.
So that's like the pre thousand. It's like this. He has like two sci-fi universes.
Yeah, he has a
One that
sci-fi
he like
universe. There's only
abandoned.
two stories, right? The there's like rings. Is it Peripheral Affair,
Oh
and the other is like the
God.
they
You
they
thinking of
involve
the
like jump
second kind of
rings or
loneliness?
something, right?
The
Per,
second
per,
kind of loneliness?
oh god, that might be two, because this is the thing, is it's also hard to different. This is a big thing when I was trying to come up with the Thousand Worlds universe, is that like he uses the same ideas, like people
Yeah.
talking about teak, for example, and calling telekinesis teak. They do that throughout all of his stories, including wild cards and stuff. So you're like,
Mm.
why would anyone use, like, I've never heard the word teak before, but for telekinesis, but George R. R. Martin does it, or Duralloy, or
Yes, yes,
you
or
know,
screech guns.
Screech
He has
Johns,
these
or an
things.
FTL drive,
Yeah.
like all the stories use that, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're in the same universe. That's just like George R. R. Martin speak. And so then it's like, how do I determine? Then I was like, okay, well, the names of the worlds. But even then, the
Mm.
Corpse Handler trilogy uses the same names of the worlds that are in the rest of the Thousand Worlds universe, even though the Corpse Handler trilogy doesn't feel like it's in the Thousand Worlds universe. So I know
Yeah.
he has two stories, and they're more action stories than they are anything else, right? Like Peripheral
Yeah.
Affair is the one where he just steals a ship, right?
Yes, and I hate it.
That's it.
I think it's boring. First of all, it's boring. It's a lot of like a guy finding, like, tracking down the ship. Like, okay, he just took the ship, blah, 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 blah. And it's like a guy arguing with his superior the whole time. And then the thing that really seals it to me was I put in my notes, the dumbass twist ending or whatever.
Right.
Where, do you remember the ending? Do you remember the ending?
It's just, I mean, somehow it's a twist where he's successfully stolen the ship or something. They think that, how do I it's been a long time. Did they think he got blown up
It,
or something, and he's actually stolen the ship?
no. No,
Huh.
like the main character guy, the like general or whatever he was, corporal, like tracks down the guy who stole the ship, who's like a troublemaker. He's like a goofball,
Yeah.
and he tracks him to like a shipyard that's like an alien shipyard, and they're beyond like the control of like the Empire, and they're like, well, we need to see proof that he actually owns this ship. It says an alien owns this ship right now, so well, we need your approval. And well, he's sending over the documents, but he's about to leave. So you got to look at the ship manifest and find any details that might prove that the alien isn't the owner of the ship or something. And the guy like looks at the first page, skips over the first page, goes all the way to the end, and he doesn't find anything that calls into question the ownership of the ship. And then the guy leaves. He's out of their reach. And then he looks at the first page and he looks at the ship's name, and it's like King Lollipop's boat or something. It's
Right,
like some
the good ship
song.
Lollipop. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and it's like I can just picture in George's head that he thought it was really funny, like it was a funny ending, like ha 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 ha. Like he didn't see that the something so obvious, and
Right.
it didn't land for me.
So George R. R. Martin had his own like private. Well, I mean, the good ship Lollipop is there's an old Shirley Temple song where she's like the
Yeah,
good ship Lollipop, da, 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 da. And somehow like he thought that was like really funny and to name a ship the good ship Lollipop. But like, why would anyone thousands of years, like hundreds of years in the future, like know that joke?
like
You
I don't
know,
even know the joke, and I'm like only
right,
like less than 100 years removed from him. Yeah, so like it
right.
doesn't land. I had to look up what it was, and so like it was like kind of the Sumerian dog joke kind of situation where like you lost the reference point, so it doesn't. And I don't think it was probably even that funny to begin with, you know.
No, no, not really.
So it's a relatively long short story for
Mhm.
a dumb, stupid, not funny joke, and I just like this is not worth reading. This sucks. Like,
On that specific issue about like making pop cultural references that he thinks are funny that everyone is going to get. One of the I think this is the big reason why his novel The Armageddon Rag failed so miserably. Um,
mm,
and so The Armageddon Rag is about music. And you know, I'm really into music. I know a lot about music, and I read it. And it's not that I didn't know all of the bands he was talking about, but he talked about the bands in this book as if the whole, like everyone in America was listening to them. Like, you know, like I
mm.
understand like that he really
That they
liked
were like
Peter,
the
Paul, and
Beatles. They were
Mary.
cultural
Yeah.
shift. Yeah.
You know, and this wasn't talking about like Beatles and Stones. Like he's speaking of like everyone knowing the story of Chris Christopherson and Janis Joplin as if like every single person was into them. And it's like, or like every person was into Peter, Paul, and Mary. And it's like, well, you know, a certain segment of a certain age of people were into them, but like 10 years later, people are forgetting, 20 years later, people are forgetting, you know, like if I wrote a book about and what's funny is I feel like if I wrote a book and talked about how important the Smashing Pumpkins were, I guarantee the Smashing Pumpkins were actually probably much bigger than many of the bands he's listing in the book. But still, people would be like, "What are you talking about? The Smashing Pumpkins?" And they were huge, right? But at the same time, like I understand that not everyone listened to the Smashing Pumpkins, and certainly kids today don't listen to the Smashing Pumpkins. So like writing a novel where in '83 about Janis Joplin and Chris Christopherson and Peter, Paul, and Mary, like, yeah, it's just not going to land. You know, it's not going to appeal to people. And so I think that's what, like the good ship Lollipop. You know? So,
It's like that what's that frog he loves that so much? He brings it up all the time.
yeah. Uh, yeah. Like that trolley, yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like froggy. Um, it's this like, oh my gosh, I'm now totally forgetting the show
Oh my god.
because
I'm getting it mixed up with the great and powerful turtle.
right, he watched the pig show and it had this weird telepathic frog that could like influence people and made them like, you know, throw pies on their own face. You know, it was just weird. Um, and the thing is, yeah, he would do a blog and he'd like quote the frog, and I was just like, I know the reference
What are you talking
because
about?
I have the fucking channel, like, but no one else. Like, I guarantee, like 99, like 999 people out of 1,000 are not getting this reference about like you know whatever the his weird creepy frog from this 1950s kids show. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah, there's like this thing where like he kind of like assumes that because it was part of his childhood, it was part of a lot of
Everyone's
people's
childhood.
childhood.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess we all do that sometimes, but I don't know. Anyway, I guess it's in his writing though, which is like for everybody.
Right.
You know?
And the thing about writing is you write what you know. And you
Yeah.
write and when you write what you know and you write it's true, and it's hit and miss. So when he writes about like heartbreak in relationships, like that's where he's like strongest, because everyone's had
Mm.
heartbreak in relationships and we know that pain. And when he writes about it, it's so honest and real and true, and that's his like big strength. And then when he
Mm.
writes about, yeah, like weird pop culture references, like dime store turtles. Do you ever see the interview where he fucking is trying to tell Stephen Colbert about dime store turtles? Oh god.
No. Just
He went on
doesn't it
Stephen
doesn't
Colbert and he spent the whole time talking about how, or maybe it was Conan or whatever, but it doesn't matter. But he like spent the whole time talking about how when he was young, he used to love drugstores because you could go in and buy snapping turtles for a dime.
Oh my god. That's like my grandpa. It's like something my grandpa would say. "Ah, you could go in and buy dime store turtles."
They
Oh
were
my
great,
god.
yeah.
Um,
Uh,
oh my gosh. Do you want to? And there's this. I have a second one for ending.
okay, okay.
Endings I kind of didn't like. Do you remember Closing Time, 1982?
Oh no, 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 no. What's closing time?
You never read
I might
Closing
have.
Time?
I don't remember what it was off the top of
It,
my head.
it's okay. It's the bar. Okay, it's about like it's written from the perspective of a guy who owns a bar,
Mm,
and he has a couple regulars who are like standard George R. R. Martin characters, like big, huge, tough guy that has like a soft heart.
yeah.
Um, Guy who's really, really poor, and he needs money, like Nimble Dick, basically Nimble Dick. Yeah, now that I think
Mm,
about it, that guy was basically Nimble Dick.
yeah.
And so, anyways, guy comes into the bar all angry, saying that Nimble Dick, I don't remember his name, I'll just call him Nimble Dick, sold him a necklace. Is it a necklace? Like an amulet or something? That has like a wheel with a whole bunch of animals on like a moon. It's a moonstone. It's like a moonstone
Yeah.
amulet because he used moonstone. And he says that like I'm gonna beat Nimble Dick up if I see him coming to this bar. Oh my gosh! The more I talk about it, the more I
The
realize
more
that
it's
this is
actually
just
the
like
same
the
fucking
the
story.
stinking
Yeah.
goose or whatever. It's just Nimble Dick. Anyway, so Nimble Dick, yeah, it's Nimble
I
Dick
fooled a
selling
fool.
Fool to Fool. Fuck me. George is just reusing the same ideas the more I think about it. Um, Anyways, he Nimble Dick sold him this thing, and he's like, I'm gonna kill Nimble Dick when he comes in here because he sold me this amulet and it turned me into a bunny rabbit when the full moon was up. Do you remember this? Have you
No,
read Closing
I
Time?
guess I'm totally
Um
blanking on this one. Okay.
um and the bartender's like every skeptical. He's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, a rabbit's not on the amulet. And he says Nimble Dick sold him it because he believed that, well, Nimble Dick said that when he wore the amulet on a full moon, he turned into a falcon. um but he's afraid of heights, so he gave it to him. He sold it to Harry Mike or whatever. I'll just call him Harry Mike because he
Yeah,
was like
yeah,
Fever
yeah.
Dreams Harry Mike. And there's another guy that like hates his wife in the bar, and he's like, "I'll buy it off you for $5, like or $50. I'll give it to my wife, and she'll turn into a bunny rabbit." Ha 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 ha! And he gets out and leaves. Um, and Nimble Dick eventually shows up, and Harry Mike is like gonna beat him up. He's like, "I'm gonna beat you up, Nimble Dick." And the bartender chases out and wants to split up the fight because they're both regulars and they're friends. And eventually, they learn that Nimble Dick's car. This is where I kind of hate the twist. The twist was so unearned and so pulled out of its ass. Like it just had, there was no hint at it. Anyways, Nimble Dick's car is a Falcon, like the brand of the car or something. Like, I don't know cars. It's a
And
Falcon.
the other guy's fucking car was a rabbit.
It's a rabbit. So the amulet turns you into whatever your fucking car you drive in. And the
You're
only
sitting there wondering like what aspect of your like your subconscious is going to like lead to your
Yeah, like,
transformation.
are you rabbit-like personality, or is it? They also talk about the amulet. The amulet has some animals on it, and maybe it's like the turn of the
Right.
moon. It's a different animal.
Right. Or is
Like
is it your fear? Like what is the thing that causes
what's
you
the
to
twist? And because it's George R.R. Martin, I was like, oh, he's gonna come up with a cool twist, and it's the car, and I'm like, what? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't. And the only like hint to that is the fact that the amulet has a wheel on it, like a spoked wheel. But anyways, that's not the complete ending. That's not the
because
complete
obviously the
ending.
wife, what kind of car does the wife have?
So they think the guy that hates his wife, they're like, oh, his car's a beetle, so he's gonna turn into a bug. I hope he has I hope he survives tonight. Ha ha ha. But then they're like, wait a second. He said he was gonna give it to his wife. What type of car does his wife drive? And
A
the
Lincoln?
bartender, the Lincoln. See, that's kind of a funny twist. The bartender looks off. They're like, oh, look, the moon's coming out. And the bartender's like, that's no moon. And he runs into his bar really quick and closes the door. And Nimble Dick turns and he's like, what type of car did she drive? And it's like, a Nova. And he gets burned like a supernova, I guess.
Yeah,
And everybody
that's
dies. And the world ends.
oh
And I don't know.
god.
It's so pulled out of its ass. He didn't. It was felt so unearned. It's like there was no way to predict it, and that's why that I found it frustrating. That and it's so random. Like, why the fuck would your car cause you for an ancient amulet to turn you into the animal that your car is named after?
Right,
Like, that doesn't
right.
make any sense.
Like what what like some like ancient like Aztec is sitting there being like, in the future, I'm going to know that automobiles are going to exist, and they're going to be marketed, and they're going to have different names based on like their marketing. Yeah, like what, like why would this
It
be a
makes no sense.
situation?
So you just end up being pissed off more than anything. You're just like, wow, that like it's kind of it's a memorable. It sticks in your mind. Like, okay, that like what a wild ending, but it's unearned. It's unearned. It's like a bad twist, and I don't know. I don't like. It. I didn't like it. It's kind of funny to
Yeah,
laugh at though, but yeah, it was a stinker. It was like because with George, you have such high expectations for endings, and this is late in his career. This
you
is
do.
1980s.
But
He's kind of
this is the other funny thing is he does have a golden period, and I kind of feel like he is really best like mid 70s to about 1980, and then
I said the same thing.
I think his like in the 80s he wrote mostly stinkers. Like there's an occasional one I love. Like I think the glass flower is wonderful. I think the glass
I
flower
like
is,
the glass flower too.
you
That's on
know,
my list of good ones.
and but for the most part like it's stinkers. Like he had a whole
Yeah.
decade where you're just like, wow, you like all your good ideas were like in the late 70s or something. Like because his late 70s stories, like he has a lot of ones that just like hit really well. Like when I'm thinking like when I look at the list and I say, okay, I would say all right, the hero is his famous first published one. None of
Hmm.
these are that great. I think Override. I think his Corpse Handler. I think I think Nobody Leaves New Pittsburgh and Override are both pretty bad. Um, with Morning Come Mistfall is pretty good. That's
Yeah, I
73.
like my. It's funny. I like Override. For some reason, I
You
like
really
Override. I kind of like the
they just
ending.
go out
Like
on
I
that
kind of
boat
like.
and like like
I like the hopeful ending. I don't know. I like the idea that he's like, "Fuck this rich guy. I'm gonna fight back." And I don't know. It's kind of hopeful. He makes his own destiny, kind of thing.
so
Okay, tell me more. What else?
okay, A Song for Leah is obviously one of his best.
Fantastic.
I think. I mean,
The
I
runners.
bring up N7 Times Never Kill Man a lot because of how important it is for Ice and Fire, but I'm trying to remember, like, do I really think it's a good story? Like, certainly
Hmm.
the ending where they kill all the children is very shocking, but I do
Yeah.
wonder, like, do I think it's a good story or not? Or am I blinded by
I
the fact there's so much Ice and Fire in that?
I think it's a good story for the reason that I think there's a lot to go off of. Like, there's a lot to think about the ending, like the Psy lore stuff. And then you talk to George about it, and he's like, "Fuck, I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe."
yeah, exactly.
Um, like, I like the idea that like even like there's like a twist ending of the twist ending kind of deal where like you can think that like, oh, the what was it like how the not the children of the forest. Oh my god, the Janshi
Yeah,
we're making those human figurines to like the Earth like god figurines to attract Necrol, right? That's his name,
yeah,
or is
yeah.
that the other guy? Like
Nicole
that there
is
he's I think
Nicole the
the
protagonist, and Dahan is the
Han.
antagonist. Even though Dahan
Yeah.
is actually more likable than
No, I like the
Nicole.
hunt. No, and I like that part too, that there's like these like it's kind of like Fever Dream where you have these two parallel opposite characters.
Yeah.
Um so like there's that and like yeah, I like that there's a lot going on in it because I don't know, I maybe I'm jaded because I read so many stinkers where like
You
nothing's
are
going
right
on.
that, and Seven Times Never Kill Man, there's a lot of different interpretations. Like, it's probably the
Mm,
story where I run into people that are like, no, no, this is how the story ended, and they tell
right.
me like their version of it. And so there's a lot of different interpretations on like what can happen. Now, I mean, I think like it's an achievement in ideas. It's an achievement in storytelling because he does have. It's the first time he really does the two point of views,
Mm.
successfully, of like Dahan and Nicole, and you feel their voices and stuff. Okay, I'm gonna say that's a good one.
Hey, a
Uh,
convinced person.
yeah, no, that's a really good one. For a Single Yesterday, that's the time travel one with the drug, where he
Yeah,
it's kind of, I think it's kind of forgettable. The Runners is one of
yeah,
those stories that has like the one idea, and that one
yeah.
idea is like living life to its fullest. He says he wrote this. It seems
It was like
impossible,
an
but he says he
hour or
wrote.
something.
Yeah, he said he wrote it during a lunch
And
break, and I was
nutty.
like, that's impossible. Impossible.
Not the George I know, not the
Yeah,
George.
exactly. I've forgotten I've definitely read Night of the Vampires, and I'm
I've
forgetting
never
what it
read Night of the
was.
Vampires. Last Super Bowl, that's one of my on my stinkers list. I think the idea is very cool. It works like he was kind of ahead of his time where it's kind of like the fear of AI generated like art and movies and stuff.
Mm.
But I'm not into sports, and like half of it is him just narrating play by play like a football game, and I'm
I
just
mean,
like bored. Like none of
that's
this
what the
matters.
Run to Starlight was too.
Oh
It
God, good thing I didn't. Yeah, I probably won't read that then.
it's like 90% describing a fucking football game, and then like and then the twist ending. Like, that's it. Like, it is ridiculous. I mean, it's like he thinks it's all interesting because like one side is are aliens and the other side are humans, but like,
Hmm.
describing how these like kangaroo people are like jumping around and stuff. And, no, 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 no. Oh god.
Oh God, what else we got here?
Men of Greywater Station. I think I remember really liking this Men of Greywater Station. Um, I
Short.
forgot Patrick Henry. I did read this one and I forgot it. But I remember not thinking it was worth anything. Lonely Song of Lauren Dore is pretty gold. That's a fucking gold story. Everyone should read it.
Oh, oh God, I didn't like that one. That's on my
Oh, really?
stinkers. Oh God. Oh, sorry. I don't, he maybe it has to do with the fact that I've been reading so much of George being like a mopey sad sack about being
Hmm.
lonely and single or whatever,
That you're kind of
heartbreak.
like, oh my god, can
I'm
you
kind
write
of
about
sick.
anything else?
Like get
And
over
this is
yourself
the
was
set. The reason I think the late '70s is the best part is that this is his sad sack period, because he goes through the
yes.
two breakups, and then he gets married, and then he has a really bad time like in his marriage, and then it's just like,
Like
wow.
holy shit, the same year. Okay, 1976. He was going insane with the mopey sad sacks because Lonely Songs of Lauren Dore, Tower of
Hmm.
Ashes, Meat
Yeah.
House Man,
Oh yeah.
um,
And yeah, Meat House
uh,
Man, of course, gold. This Tower of Ashes is pretty good. I don't really like Star Lady. I hate Nobody Leaves Pittsburgh.
I didn't mind it that much, but I think maybe I was like coming in with very low expectations because I knew that George hated it. I knew that you didn't like it that much. Um, I
I
did not. I
forgot.
read the computer charge
I've
today, and I did not like it.
I've
There's just
definitely read it.
nothing
I
going
forgot
on
what
in
it
the
was
story.
about. Is
It's
that
just it's not about anything, President. It's about
That's probably
nothing.
why I
It's about
forgot. Is it just a battle, right?
It's just a battle, and the general like kind of fucks up, and that's
Oh,
it. Like
because
there's no like
the computer like there's a battle, but the computer misinterprets his like order or something,
his
or there's like an
command or
Asimov law where it won't like do something like
it. It's not even that. Like I don't even think there's an Asimov thing. Like there's an explanation. It's like he gave the computer a command and then went back on his command, and the computer fucked up because it was retreating or something like that, and he was angry at like there's nothing going on in that story. I was like shocked. I read it today and I was like I was shocked how like much of a time waster that was. Like because you expect there to be something about
right.
morality or themes or AI or something, but there was nothing.
Um,
Anyways,
in the House of the Worm, I think is it's such a rich. This is one of his big victories in like creating a rich setting with world
hmm
building. It's pretty good story, but
yeah,
the strength is like, wow, you created this really interesting, sick, disgusting world, sad,
yeah.
depressing, sick, disgusting world. But it's like it's so rich. Like he could have
Mm.
had
Like the fact that you can have like even like minor details like the shape changer, the change master room with like how
yeah,
there's like silver thetas and gold thetas, like that's interesting. And there's appears to be like
right.
two sects that broke off, and it's never explicitly stated in the story, but you can deduce it.
Right,
Um,
right. And like
very well done.
and
Yeah.
even the beginning like there and some of it there's no point to it. Like why is it necessary that their like pope figure slowly remove his limbs and eyes and like try to become a worm over time? Like none of that like has any effect like on the story. Because the story
Yeah.
is about like him going down and discovering who the grounds were and searching after the meat bringer and all of that, right? Like has nothing
Mm.
to do with the weird religion that like the beginning of the story like why why are you going to this horrific disgust like horrific like description of their like pope. Oh god. But it's a real
It's
strength
excellent.
in like the vivid like the story like most of in the House of the Worm is burned into my head because it's
Mhm.
so vivid. So
And I love
it's
the
good stuff.
ending, like how he wraps things up in the ending, where it's like he will be Enelin would be allowed to live because he was entertaining. Like they
Yeah, it
didn't
was,
believe the story, but they thought he
it's
was
like a
entertaining.
sliver of hope in the ending. It was actually kind of
Yeah,
nice. Stone City, I really
city.
like the Stone
Yeah,
City. But the Stone City, if you remember, the Stone City has a big part where they go to a bar and talk to his loser friends. So many stories of George R. R. Martin involve going to a bar and running into loser friends that
yes,
represent his loser friends from Bayonne, New Jersey. Like clearly,
yes.
they all clearly
He
represent his loser friends
in
from Nimble Dick is a fucking is a loser friend from Bayonne, New Jersey. And
Nimble Dick is a real person. We don't know his name, but he is a
oh, clearly.
real person.
But right, nobody leaves New Pittsburgh. The whole story is essentially going to a bar and hanging out with losers, right? The Stone
Yes, and
City,
that's it.
most of it is like going to a bar and hanging out with losers. And I guess, yeah, again, like closing time, going to a bar and hanging out with losers, right? Like,
And then die. Yes. Dying of the Light. What do you think of Dying of the Light?
um, I do think like it is. I think it's mostly really good. I think it's really good.
Mm.
There, it's a hilarious story because there's also so many errors in it, like the distance stuff and like, um, and
Them not talking about the fucking whisper jewel, like
right,
the
yes,
letter, the message
yeah,
to come and
yeah,
see her like halfway through.
the ridiculousness of like the villain getting away with his conspiracy, like it just would never happen. Like would like if anybody like spent like honestly 2 minutes talking to each other, like they would have even if they spend days together and they don't spend like 2 minutes being like, wait, what happened with your whisper jewel? Like,
Why are you here? Like that's it. That's all like all she has to add is like, why are you visiting me? Like, oh, that's like the
oh,
first thing your friend said. Drop in town randomly. Like, well, what brings you to town?
what brings you in town? Oh no, your whisper jewel called me. No, it didn't. huh. Like that would have been like
Isn't
the
that
first
weird?
thing.
That guy's plan just falls apart immediately, and no violence happens. No
Right.
story happens. Oh my god.
But Dying of the
Uh,
Light, it's saved because it has, like, I would say the Breton Braith, like it has a
mhm.
very beautiful ending with Breton Braith, and
Yes.
that's this, like the Breton Braith twist in Dying of the Light is one of the best twists that I think George R. R. Martin has ever written, and
Oh yeah.
where you're going the whole story and everybody's telling you like, no, Breton Braith believes in all of this honor and he's hunting you down because he believes you're a mock man and all of these things about his culture and da 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 da. And then you finally run into him and he's like, no, like you killed my lover.
You
Like
killed my gay elderly boyfriend.
my gay elderly boyfriend who loved me despite the fact half my face was burned and I'm a hideous human being. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Like you're like, oh, that's really like that's one of those things where like, oh, the
Mhm.
twist, the twist, like once you weren't thinking about it, but then the twist happens and you're like, oh no, yeah, no, I should have thought that the whole time.
And it
That's
and it recontextualizes the earlier scenes with him, like where he's
yes,
trying to calm Chell down, and Chell's actually the zealot one.
yeah.
It's great. It's
Like
great, and it's
everybody
very
thinks
well.
Breton Braith is the crazy one because he's got a half burned face, and really, it's his husband. You know, like it's that twist is one of the best George R. R. Martin twists, and I do think the final battle, like, and it cutting off and being
Right.
ambiguous is
And he felt
beautiful.
really, and he was really cold. Like I love the final line even.
Oh
Like
yeah,
he,
you
oh,
get
it's
that
so beautiful.
smile. You know, there's definitely some it's very ambitious in the sense that he's trying to come up with a moral philosophy in the book and he kind of fails. Like
Mm.
I've read the story a few times and I'm just like, wait, what do they believe? I don't understand. Like, what, I've reread it and he's just like, these bands, like the reason we wear these is because like they represent what might be, and you're like, oh, wait, what? And he's like, you're not strong, but no one has ever called. No, you're not weak, but no one has ever called you strong. And you're like, what does that fucking mean?
What
Like,
are
I
you
don't.
fucking talking about?
What the fuck? You're just kind of
Yeah,
scratching
no.
your head,
It
and the
it's
character's
like
just
the
like he didn't
Yoda.
know what he was talking about at first, but then was like, no. Then he figured out maybe, and you're like, really? Because I haven't. I don't.
It's like the prequel Yoda sayings, like fear leads to anger. It sounds they treat it like it's profound, but it's really
Right.
not,
But once you
like
analyze
yeah.
it, you're like, no, that doesn't make any sense at all.
That's word salad.
But
Bitter
I do
bloom.
think Dying
Oh,
of the Light is great. I do think it's great, and I think the Brett
yeah.
and Bray thing, and even like the obligation that you feel for exes, even though exes
Mhm,
don't necessarily deserve your obligation, is a very interesting topic as well.
mhm.
Um, like you look back and think of like all of your exes, and you're just like, oh, that person was horrible. But at the same time, if they're like, I need your help, you'd be like, fine. Like why do you have this obligation? And it's a really weird exploration of that, and it's
Mhm.
like I've never run across that in anything like anything else
Yeah,
where
and that
like,
they don't get together. They like it's
yeah,
about him moving on, but also he has an obligation or like not really moving on at the same time, like moving on
right,
in certain ways, but
right,
not.
like I
Yeah,
made a vow to you to love you, you broke that, but I still am a man of my word, like
yeah.
that kind of like you know
It's very human. I don't know,
oh
like
yeah.
because I understand it. Like I kind of understand it, even though it makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it's that's the thing is that like even when George R. R. Martin doesn't make sense, his emotions that he puts in the story are true
Mm,
and real
mhm.
because that's what he's good at writing, right? He's good at finding the real and true emotions like of that story. So everything that's true about about Dying of the Light, like fuck, I forgot the villain's name, but like
Oh, oh gosh. Oh, the I don't remember his name.
yeah,
I know what he.
Littlefinger, whatever we're gonna call him, Littlefinger.
Yes, yes, he has the little owl.
Yeah, he's got the little owl. but
he's Kim Dis,
he's Kim Dissy, right?
philosophy.
But
I
like,
forgot his name though.
even though his plan doesn't make any sense and he's ridiculous, like we all understand his like and he's a pathetic character, but we all kind of
Mm.
understand his pain. Like we
Yeah.
understand like everyone has like unrequited love and jealousy. Everybody has felt that, right? And like
Mm.
you feel his like pathetic, angry, unrequited love like situation. You feel it, and you feel
Mm.
like our protagonist, like and his ex, and like his feelings about how one feels about an ex and being dumped, and you feel like Brett and Braith's emotions and all these sorts of things. And so all of the like those characters are so rich and so true. And even though the story isn't tight, like the characters are so good in it. So
Yeah.
Dying in the Light is a
Yeah,
real
yeah.
hit.
You've convinced me. I really like Dying Light because I was a little mad. I was a little iffy, but yeah, now that it's been a while since I've read it too. It's been like years.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's filler.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. That's all I kind of remember is there's a lot of filler, crying
Like,
Lamia, and
right,
oh
like going
no,
to like there's an entire chapter where he just like
he steals a
like
car.
feels weird after waking up and like and or there's an entire chapter where they go to some restaurant and order fish. Like you're like, what are you doing?
Oh God. Okay. I love that I can talk to you about this because I can talk to nobody else on this planet
No
because
one
nobody
else is
cares
gonna
about these
understand what you're
stories.
talking about.
How do you feel about Bitter Blooms? How do you feel about Bitter
Um,
Blooms?
I think
Karen
Bitter
Hall.
Blooms. I think it's a good story. I think this is one of the ones where he's Bitter Blooms is I think where he starts getting into for lack of a better term, chick lit. Like he starts getting into like writing women and understanding women. Oh, is
Yeah.
Windhaven on here? I guess you didn't put Windhaven on
Um,
here.
I did not put Windhaven on here. Sorry, my cat is very interested in what's
Oh,
going on
no
here.
worries, no worries. I mean, Bitter Blooms is where he first starts addressing like sex and gender and things
Mm,
like that. There's a lot of wildling culture in that, a lot of ice and fire kind of stuff.
hmm
But I think
Lesbian
it's
stuff too.
okay. Yeah, I wouldn't say
Yeah,
it's like uh, the
it's
greatest
okay.
story. I'm not like you
I
need to read Bitter Blooms. You need to read Bitter Blooms.
Call Him Moses is kind of on my stinkers list. It's
Yeah,
not a
I
bad
agree. I
story.
agree.
It's just there. It's especially relative to the other tough stories. There's nothing going on in it.
hmm I would
Like it's
actually
just like, oh yeah,
I would actually say with Tough, I think Colin Moses is a stinker, and I actually think I don't mind the food trilogy, but like
yeah,
you didn't need three stories to tell the same fucking message, right?
yes, yes, yes.
Like
100%. Like, yeah, the Suthlum food trilogy is it's a good story. It's a good like discussion of morality and power and all that kind of stuff. But you're right that it doesn't need to be stretched out into 3 books or 3 short
right.
stories. Sorry, it should have just been
I
one.
think the Plague Star is um very good. I think that's just
I think
really
it's very
fun.
fun.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
fun. I think Guardians is pretty good.
I love
And
Guardians. Yeah,
Um, and I
I
think even a
love.
Beast for Norn is
Yeah,
okay. But
like
it's
the thing that annoys me a little bit with the tough God no how many of there 5 or whatever
I think
is
it's
in
is it
George.
seven? Seven? Is it seven stories?
Oh my God, is there 7? Damn, they didn't need
I
to be
think well,
7
I
of these
think he
stories.
only wrote I think he wrote three before the book. I think he
Hmm.
wrote A Beast for Norn, Call him Moses and Guardian.
Guardians.
And then
Yeah, and then
he
he went
needed a
back.
story to bring them together. So he wrote the Plague Star. Like, how did he find the ship? The origin tale, and then he had the
Yeah,
food trilogy.
call them
So
yeah, and call him Moses is also very mean spirited. Like Tough is
mhm.
a weird character in it where he like breaks this guy's fucking arms like just
Oh
randomly,
yeah, oh yeah,
and it's like what? And it's like
yeah.
what?
It's very
Yeah.
shocking.
So
Like
and
Tough is a really weird character. that doesn't really yeah, and he's been changed quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's and this is where I guess I can jump to Nightflyers. Nightflyers,
Mm.
I don't like Nightflyers that much
I
because
don't think it's that great. No. And
I don't think it's
there's a short version and there's a long version, and the long version isn't even any better.
yeah. Because say one of my main reasons why I don't like Nightflyers is because everybody in it is like a jerk. Like there's no
Mhm.
character to really latch onto.
Yeah.
Um, it's something that George in his George writing, like it's a common thing, especially in Tough. Oh my gosh, where everybody except Tough is written as a massive jerk just to make Tough more vindicated and right, you know?
Right.
And it's just it frustrates me. Like I don't know, it seems like cheap and kind of like like a cop. Like people aren't natural. Like people are just assholes.
Here's the so I watched a little Joel video where he was
Hmm.
talking about this one episode of Twilight Zone when I was young, and I still remember because I remember seeing this episode of Twilight Zone and it scarred me when I was young. I remember seeing it
Oh,
and crying and running to my father and telling him about this episode and me like crying and falling asleep in his arms. Like I remember this very vividly.
jeez.
It was an episode called Masks. And in
Oh,
this
okay. Yeah, I know this
yeah,
one. Yeah.
and in this story, like this grandfatherly character, the patriarch, his family sucks. His like son like tortures dogs, and his daughter like is only interested in money, and they're all waiting for the guy to die, and
Hmm.
so they can take his money, and they all suck. And so he makes these masks. Then he tells them, okay, well, you know, you can get my inheritance if you wear these masks for like a day. And they're like, fine.
Hmm.
So they wear the masks for a day, and then he dies. And they're like, woohoo! Finally, we can take off these masks, and finally, the old man's dead. And they take off their masks, and their faces have twisted to the shapes of the masks. And so now
Hmm.
they're all scarred for life with monstrous faces. And little Joel pointed out, you know who also sucks? The guy who just disfigured his fucking family, his children. Like,
Yeah.
what a fucking monster he is.
Right.
Why does he get a pass? And it's
Right.
like, oh, because he's delivering the evil justice to the evil people. And you're like, oh, but
Uh,
you know, like, but that's the thing, is everything's like by comparison. If you make the other characters even worse, then the character looks better by comparison. But yeah, like
yeah.
Tough is a jerk. He's a super big jerk. But everybody else in the story is also a jerk, but dumber. And so like
Yeah.
Tough looks like the intelligent person.
Right, right. And I find that kind of like frustrating. And like Night Flyers has that too, where it's like everybody's a massive jerk and asshole, and people
Yeah.
like couple hates each other and are fighting, and then somebody's like a fat slob that's like bigoted, and it's like, and then they're like murdered in like the most gruesome way possible,
Mm-hmm.
and it just like leaves a bad taste in your mouth
Right.
as like a reader, where you're like, was that deserved? You know, like
Right. And
I
the
don't know, like
protagonist is essentially a Nazi, but at the end she discovers that she should maybe not be a Nazi, you know. Yeah, and the thing is, even the character of Royd, he just he just kind of seems like a weird, pathetic shut-in. Like, why should I like this
right.
guy? Like, yeah,
Why
you
do
were
I like this guy?
abused,
He's a weird creep.
you know, like you were abused. That sucks. But what else? You know, you're right.
Oh God, yeah,
No,
yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Nightflyers, but I there's a lot of weird aspects to Nightflyers that are shocking. Like the fact that you're
Yeah.
going to have a story about, you know, a cross gender clone of yourself that you're going to like raise to be your lover, and then you're going to die and your soul's going to go into the computer, and you
The
still
computer has
maintain your
telepathy still.
telekinesis even though your soul has been put into the computer. You know, I'm just like, you know,
It's like George is like so galaxy mega brain there that like you have to praise him for it, because it's like, how do you come up with such an insane idea? Oh
right.
yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
always the story where I'm like, you think like the Preston Jacobs like theories are crazy, and you're like, no, no, George R. R. Martin is crazy. Like the fact that people are like, oh, the time like Tyrion is a time traveling like fetus. I'm like, that's not even crazier like than things that George R. R. Martin's come up with. The Ice
Oh,
Dragon.
wait, you skipped over
Oh,
Worship. Way
oh,
across
you're
the
right.
dragon.
You're right. You're right.
How
Okay,
did
I
we
think
skip over
Worship is
Sand
pretty
King?
forgettable.
Yeah,
Um,
Across and Dragon.
that yeah, it's where they find he finds the conspiracy of like fetus men, um, fetus men in a jar, you know,
Who create
who have their
fake
own secret
religions?
religion. I think with Wayne Cross and Dragon, which I think is an okay story, but there's a lot of like George was raised Catholic that I will never understand,
Hmm.
because I wasn't
It
raised
only,
religious, you know. So
yeah.
like, and there's a lot of
It's
it,
like the
you know.
Shirley Temple thing. It's like only kind of relevant to his specific, I don't know, background.
Mhm. Yeah, and to Catholics, and you have to essentially be a lapsed Catholic. Like it
Mm.
would, you know, I'm sure it would like connect, but in the same way that um, the guy that did Clerks, you know, he does a bunch of stuff on being lapsed Catholic, and you're like, okay,
Mm.
like Dogma, you know, like I watched Dogma, and it's like, okay, there's some funny stuff, but I just like it doesn't connect. It doesn't connect with me. Like I'm just like I didn't
Mm.
grow up in an environment where people were telling me about like angels and demons, um, you know, doing things, but whatever. Okay, and Sandkings. Sandkings, I think, first time I read it, I didn't like it, and then reading it the second and third time, I realized it's pretty fucking genius.
I was explaining the plot of Sand Kings to my mom, and
Mm.
she was like, "That's insane!" Like she was like getting into it, like to my explanation of it. So I was like, "Okay, oh yeah, yeah, yeah." I like Sand Kings a lot. So I like Sand
Yeah,
Kings.
and I think Sandkings is where he really like like leans into themes, and like the themes
Mm.
being, you know, a reflection of society and things like that the most. You know, that's where I mean he does it in A Song for Leah as well, but like that's where he
Mhm.
really this is why like Sand Kings and A Song for Leah like win the awards. It's like, oh, you actually paid attention to themes, you know, and like the themes are very rich, and like where you're making comparisons to like humanity. Okay, okay, I
Mhm.
get it.
And like,
um
yeah, about like civilizations and societal
mhm,
advancement and what religion is relevant to societies and do we
yeah,
need religion? So yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's also
yeah,
kind of the first time he really wrote from a point of view of an absolutely insane person,
yeah, yeah.
and so this is where you
Which
kind of
is
like,
fun. It's
yeah,
kind of fun.
and you know, you kind of get that Cersei vibe where this person is nuts, and you know they're the protagonist, but they're nuts, right? Like
What was the protagonist's name? He's got like a wild name. I just
Simon
remember.
Cress.
It's Cress. Yes, it's like a obviously like a villain name. He's good at writing names, like very memorable names. Um,
um, let's see. Okay, we talked about Guardians a little.
there
Oh
were-
no, first Ice Dragon. I think the Ice Dragon is a stinker. I don't like it.
I've never read Ice Dragon. I don't know. I think I started it and then I stopped reading it because I just was like, it's kind of boring. Because I heard that it had like a Song of Ice and Fire kind of stuff on it, and then like it didn't
It
keep
does
me.
not. I mean, it has stuff like they talk about a King's Road or something
Yeah,
like once.
yeah, yeah. There's not much. I was lied to.
There's not
Do
much.
you
There's not much you can get from it. Really, you know, not much. Um, like
remembering Melody? Do you remember remembering
I
Melody?
do. This one's more about like about ghosts and whether or not a ghost is like physical versus like the memory you have of somebody. I think it's something like that. And
It's
I
really not. It's really, I read it last night,
oh
and it
really? I'm
really doesn't
forgetting
have
it.
that. It doesn't have much of that. Well, I guess, and maybe you are a little bit right because it's not emphasized enough for me to think that it's profound.
Mm,
Um, where like, yeah, it's more like a guy's like haunted that he didn't help out his annoying friend, and now
yeah,
he's haunted. But it's ambiguous. It's ambiguous. Is it actually a ghost haunting him, or is it like
his
his
memory
guilt,
of
his
them,
own
his guilt.
guilt?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
like
so it's
what is
okay.
that is saying like what is a ghost? Is a ghost like our imagination, or is a ghost like actual physical embodiment or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's
N-
that in there. Yeah.
Needleman, I read, but I totally forgot what this one was about.
I don't remember Needleman. I must have read it a while ago. In the Lost Lands, I don't remember that.
Oh, In the Lost Lands is probably the first time he really wrote a fantasy story. I mean, Ice Dragon, I suppose, but In the Lost Lands, it deals with um like a sorceress sending a person out to try to um like find this animal because he needs the skins, because if he gets the skins he can then like transform into a wolf or something. It's kind of like you
Oh,
hear about these stories from like the Boltons, and why they hunt Starks, but the people
yeah.
actually do physically transform into like wolves, so it actually is
It's
fantasy.
like magic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's actually magic. It's not, there's no like sci-fi explanation for or anything. um so um it's not a great story, but I do
Hmm.
remember it just being like, oh, he actually wrote like an actual fantasy story.
Yeah, the
Um,
first time I read a fantasy story by George was like Laura Lonely Songs of Lorien Doran or whatever.
yeah,
Where it's just straight up magic. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think Skin
Uh
Trade also is kind of magical.
yeah.
There's some things in that don't kind of add up. You just can't explain. Okay, so Closing Time is about
Closing
the
time.
amulet. Your
Stinker,
favorite?
stinker. That was one of the few that actually made me angry. Like I finished a George R. Martin story and I was angry at it because I was just like,
Like, yeah,
this. I felt bamboozled.
fucking asshole! How dare you do this? Um, Fever Dream. Uh, Fever Dream, I think, is a great book. I think it's an excellent book. I think it's this is where he really, Fever Dream is where he masters um, writing an environment and having really like
Mm,
and really getting into characters. It's funny how each of the stories, like you can see where he's flexing his like abilities, like
and like his
when he
knowledge too.
right, when he masters like themes versus endings versus like um abstract sci-fi thoughts. And Fever
Mm.
Dream is when he like really studied the history of something and decided to really like get into the environment and describe it, and you really
I
feel
got
like
like
you're in
in
that world. Yeah.
I got really invested in like this short, brief period of time in like the U.S. history of like steamboats. I'm like, steamboats are awesome. I wish I lived at this time to ride one.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
consider it George's best work. I actually think it's well because like it has an ending. Like that's the thing. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
like
true.
it and it has a very great ending. I love the twist with the like, "Wait, you fucking idiot, like, the steamboat's been on land for 20 years. You thought it
Right,
would
because you
work,
really think like they're gonna
dumbass."
have a final fucking showdown of steamboats on the river. It's gonna be fucking epic one last time. And it's like, no, no, we're it's gonna be a pathetic little fight in a broken down like steamboat on land. Um, and I think the
Between an
character,
old fat guy.
yeah, between an old fat guy and the character of Sour Billy, where again, like
Oh,
this is
yeah.
like him perfecting writing villains. Like Sour Billy is such a wonderful, horrible, pathetic, weirdly relatable character.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, wow, he really got into some dark territory there
Like
and
I
appreciate it.
remember
Yeah.
when I was reading, like, the last chapter and, like, I got so invested, like, when, Abner Marsh walks up and he sees elderly Sour Billy, and Sour Billy goes, "Well," and, like, he just fucking, like, shoots him with the shotgun before he
Yeah.
can say anything. Like, I, like, cheered. I was like, "Yeah!"
But then like the surprise,
Then
because you're just like, Sour Billy's dead, and then you're like, that last Sour Billy chapter
Oh,
where,
yeah.
because the
He shits his
whole,
pants.
it's not too much of a secret that Damon Julian is just stringing Sour Billy along. That
Yeah.
there is no converting people to vampires. That's not a thing. And he's lying to Sour Billy, and Sour Billy is sad and deluded. And this is the whole metaphor for like the poor thinking that they can be rich, or like the you know the the poor white trash thinking they can be gentlemen, like the explanation on why did the poor Confederate soldier like fight for the Confederacy when like the Confederate like the slave owners were a bunch of wealthy people and these were like poor white trash. And the whole idea is what was like because they're strung along with this belief that like you can be gentlemen like us, you can be rich like
Someday.
us. We're gonna string you along. It's like beautiful theme, George. Like and Sour Billy is a masterful character. And he's just been strung along the entire story. And you're just like, no, he's never. But then when he gets shot with the shotgun and they do one last bit of Sour Billy chapter and you're in his head and he thinks that maybe he's finally changing to be a vampire. There's like this moment where you're like,
holy shit.
Is he actually changing to be a vampire? Like there's this last moment where you're like, wait, maybe? Because he just survived a shotgun blast to the stomach.
And he fell off the side of a steamboat, like all the way to the ground.
Right.
Oh my gosh. And like
and I was like, how did I get fooled? After the whole story where you're like, there's no, of course he's not going to be converted into a vampire. And then in that last chapter, I'm just like, oh, I thought this guy was dead. Like, oh, could he be? Could
and I love how he just drags himself like with full of hate. He's like dragging himself up like a stairwell, and then David Julian finally tells him like, "You dumbass! Like I can't convert you." And he's like, "Fuck you!" And like, there's a knife at him. It's a great ending. Oh my god, what an awesome book!
Yeah. No, Fevre Dream. Yeah, some good stuff. Excellent.
Excellent.
Unsound Variations.
back to the
Unsound Variations, I think is a stinker. Despite the fact that I talk about this story a lot and the time travel elements, because George R. R. Martin like is using time travel elements in Ice and Fire, and therefore we have to go to the time travel stories. I don't actually think Unsound Variations is a very good story.
I think the idea of the villain is very fun, where it's a guy that's like that insanely petty is kind of funny.
Oh yeah, but almost unrealistically so.
Right.
It was like one chess tournament in college, and we were like, "Ah, oh, you screwed up." I did not screw up. Like it was an unsound variation, and I will go through time and ruin each of your lives. Like
over and over again, endlessly. It's like there's a like a meme of like it's literally a meme, like where there's what's the villain of the Flash, like Evil Flash, or what's his name? Evil Flash. Where he's like, somebody made like an edit of it, like where he went back in time and killed his mom or something. But people made an edit where he's like, remember that one time when you were kissing the girl for the first time and you came all over yourself? That was me, Barry. That was me. I jerked you off really, really quickly and embarrassed you. That was me the whole time. Like that's what Unsound Variations. That's what that is.
It's true. like their crime was so minor in a life, especially because obviously a dude like this, like, would have been teased by other people. So he would have had more hatred for other people than his like chess teammates who are just you screwed up on that one, like so weird. But it's also just, the whole story is just a bunch of dudes having a conversation. What I kind of liked about the idea was that maybe the guy was making the whole thing up and there was no time machine. But I wish George maybe pushed that a little further. But I think like rereading it, there's no way he would have known all of this information if he didn't have the time machine. But it's like, it would be, I think if he like hovered on that line a little, I think it might have been a better story. Like maybe there's no time machine,
Yeah.
But I think there clearly was.
We're getting into the 80s. We're getting into the 80s.
No, now we're getting into stinker time.
And steam.
Stinker time. Armageddon Rag. We talked about this earlier. I think there's a reason why the book failed. I don't think it's a bad book. I don't think it makes much sense or has much direction. He's getting visions for some reason. He does some things at the end where he sees ghosts on stage. I don't know. You read it?
I read it. I don't know. I'm kind of mad on it. I read it a while ago too, like 2 years ago or something like that. So I don't remember too much of it. I
It
remember like
yeah.
the Lord of the Rings. They had I don't know.
The
People were
punk
talking about
band, the Nazgul
Tolkien.
guy with the hair. They find a guy who looks just like him. You know.
It's the pop. You're right that the problem is that it just doesn't resonate. Like it only resonates with a very special subclass of hippie, like, and
Yeah,
nobody
right.
else. Like it's written just for them.
Right. But he's also
Um,
writing about punk rock, which he knows nothing about. Right? It's really weird.
I never heard of monkey treatment until today when I did this research. What the hell is monkey treatment? Have you ever read it?
I think I probably did. Let me see if I can if I can bring it up and see if I remember any of this. Monkey treatment, monkey treatment. Where is it?
Oh,
Remembering melody
nice.
sound. Oh, here it is. Um. Oh, right. This is about a fat guy who needs to lose weight.
That's it. That's it. Is there a twist at least? Is there like a cool twist?
I do. It's been so long, but I'm trying to remember. There is a twist, and it has to do with somebody falling out a window and landing on a fat guy, and him breaking his fall like a big pillow and saving his life.
What? What? Okay.
Yeah,
That doesn't
that's
sound like
right.
a great twist, but it's okay, I guess.
Yeah, it was something. Yeah, he was. Yeah. I mean, just in case you want to know the last words of the story, it's
Okay.
because he's fallen out this window and he's landed upon a fat man who broke his fall like a pillow. Otherwise, he would have died. But he's still like very very injured. 3 days later, he managed his first words. Pizza, he said. It came weak and hoarse from between his lips, and then louder still. And before long, he was pushing the nurse call button and shouting and pushing and shouting, "Pizza, pizza, pizza, pizza!" He chanted, and he would not be calm until they ordered one for him. Nothing had ever tasted so good.
All right. That's an okay. That's an okay. There like when I heard it, I was like, okay. And then just how he wrote it is more is I
I
don't know, it's
mean,
more
you
compelling.
know, at this point, it's the '80s. His prose is good at this point. It's just
Yeah.
whether the idea is good. Like even the way he writes, I was like, that sounds so very Ice and Fire. Like
Right,
even the way
right.
he's like crafting that sentence.
Pizza in the Song of Ice and Fire. You go to one inn that has pizza.
You know,
It's
and
pizza
like
in Volantis.
and he has a good last line. Nothing had ever tasted so
Mm,
good. Like
mm.
it's. Let's see. Um, when did
I don't
here
recognize
we
these ones.
I don't remember Weekend in a War Zone,
I don't
nor the
remember
many
this one.
colored fires of Star Ring. Like I say, I think that's a sequel to the other, the one where they steal the ship. I think it has to do with like
Oh, oh.
rings and I don't know.
I'll
But
stay
again, it's
away
more.
from it. I hate that sci-fi universe. Every story set in it, I hate.
There's only two, but I think it's a I think it's more an action adventure story than anything else.
Okay. Okay.
We talked about Tuf Voyaging, Plague Star, Portraits of Children.
Well, how do you? Yeah, I'm curious to know what you think about Portraits of His Children.
I forgot this one. What's this one again?
It's like oddly, like it seems almost like autobiographical of like George. Like
Uh,
it's a writer who
this is ringing a bell
the
now.
daughter
Yeah.
the daughter was sexually assaulted, and he used the story in his help his writing career because he was losing steam. In a lot of ways, it's George's like writing career,
Mm.
and like how fucked up that is to use somebody's, I don't know,
Pain,
trauma.
right,
Yeah.
for
um
himself. Yeah. I see. I see. Okay. Maybe this is some sort of apology story that he wrote to somebody.
I like Portraits of His Children. I think it's so raw. I don't know if it's great like all the way through, but I think it's a very raw story. And I like read it and just like how the story starts is like the daughter like going like you raped me, like and like leaving him, and like you're just like, oh my gosh, like that's so horrible. But as the story goes along, you learn that like the she was kind of like speaking metaphorically in that way, and
Yeah.
what he actually did is like almost as bad, and like bad in like a different way, and horrific in a different way. Um, yeah, I like Portraits of His
It
Children.
is so funny, like getting to his prose though, because it's like his prose is so much better in the '80s, even though the stories aren't necessarily as good. Um, Donahue, his firstborn, the boy he'd wish he'd been, Sissy, his true love, Barry Layton, his wise and tired alter ego, Nicole, the daughter he'd never had, his people, his characters, his children. A week later,
Mm.
another, much smaller package arrived. Inside a carton, Inside the carton were copies of 4 of his novels, a bill, and a polite note from the artist inquiring if there would be any more commissions. Richard Cantling said no and paid the bill by check. You're like, oh,
Yeah, the ending, you're just like, what happened there? Like, because the ending is kind of like, what the fuck? Like, was his daughter actually? Did his daughter even exist? Like, kind of
right.
situation. Like, I don't. What happened? Yeah, I still don't understand what happened at the end of Portraits of His Children, but it's compelling. It's written in
Yeah.
a compelling way.
Um,
Yeah,
okay,
all
Loaves
the
and
tough.
Fishes. This is all tough. Under Siege. Under Siege is the time traveling dwarf story. Um, which I think is okay. I mean, this is the one where Tyrion, the birth of Tyrion. Um, this is an interesting one because so originally Under Siege was a historical fiction story, um,
Mm.
and just involving the one other story about like Finland and Russia and then this moment in history. And then he took that story, I think it was called Fortress, and he then broke it up and made the time traveling dwarf part of him going back in time. Um, and um, I don't know, like I don't think it's a super great story. I think it's okay, but I thought the
Mm.
ending was a little weird. Like you know, at the end, one of the characters, the protagonist, the time traveling dwarf, melds his consciousness with the person who was in history.
The Russian guy.
I think
Yeah,
he might be Finnish or
they're Finnish. Yeah, maybe they're fighting Russians. I forgot.
yeah,
Yeah.
and like, and he just kind of decides that like, no, this is going to be a great friendship. Like this is going to be fantastic. Our two consciousnesses
Right.
merging, and he just kind of like accepts it, and then they live like this like happy life after that. And it's just like, I don't know. That's a really weird, creepy idea. That like
Right.
to
Especially in light of like how he handled Bran and Hodor later, where it's and Varamir Sixskins, where it's like terrifying, like stealing somebody's body
right.
and
I mean,
melding with them.
he's trying to say that it wasn't a
Uh,
stealing, but the fact that they were like blending together, so they were there together, as one human being, like fused. But it's a weird.
I
It's
felt like
still in that sense. You're like, if you're the color
I felt
blue,
like I didn't it didn't feel like it was earned, like I
right? He
guess
just
in
kind
the
of
story where
snaps
the
into like, no, this is going to be great.
yeah. And that's my problem with it. Yeah, where the other guy, like the Finnish guy that in the past, there was no like he didn't really even know what was going on the whole time. Like
Right.
Tyrion
Like
might have known, but the other guy had no clue what was going
it's one
on.
thing for Tyrion who
So,
lives in a post-apocalyptic world where the one woman he loves is like sleeping with a different dude. Um,
hmm.
and he's a mutant. He's like that's like that's one thing. He has nothing to live for. But like, yeah, this random dude just being like, oh, no, I'm gonna sacrifice like my consciousness by letting somebody else like meld with me. It's a little weird. Yeah, unearned is
Yeah, I'd say
um
it's under. It's a very cool idea. It's very interesting ideas. I like like what happens after that, where it's like he's affecting changing of the future in different ways than what his
mhm.
superiors told him. But yeah, it's a little bit unearned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if he had spent more time on that character, like say not liking himself or something, or like wanting some new aspect of himself, like if only I were more confident, or something, if only I had some other, it's just such a
If
horrible.
only I was a chess playing dwarf.
If only I could
Yeah.
play chess and knew a lot about history. Um,
Oh.
the glass flower is probably my favorite. I think
Oh.
it's just I think it's a beautiful story. Um, despite it's also very cruel and violent and
Hmm.
it's almost George R. R. Martin
Obscene.
on crack. Like it's everything
Yeah.
you kind of think about George R. R. Martin, right? Really crazy idea.
Yeah.
Um, Also like an exploration of like grand themes and like an exploration of like what consciousness is and what the self is on a really
Hmm.
deep level, and then like ultra violent but also very beautiful, and the prose is very
Hmm.
beautiful, and like describing like existence and life is very beautiful. So it's kind of everything in his extremes. It's, the prose is great, the ideas are crazy and great. It's like sad and beautiful and hopeful all at the same time, and
Hmm.
violent and cruel and
Existential.
existential as well.
I just remember like the what's the scene where they're like having like the psychic battle or whatever
Mm-hmm.
for the bodies in Claire Namas, like it's like her trying to like seize Claire Namas, and is like he's so confident in himself or something like that that like his like he envisions his penis is really massive or something. Do you remember
Yeah,
this?
yeah, that's right.
There's just like crazy stuff in there that you're like no other writer except George R. R. Martin could write something so weird,
Right.
and make
Or
it
like
work.
the flying demon monster like body swaps into somebody else, and of course the first thing he tries to do is like fly because he has no idea what's going on, and it's just like he's just this tortured animal, and he just like plummets
Yeah.
to his death, and you're like there's no like, it's so George R. R. Martin because like in a regular story they would take an abused character and they'd be like, well, the justice of the story has the abused character like escape and live a good life. But in this, he's just like, no, I'm going to be like realistic or random. And like the abused character, this poor flying demon character who he body swaps and then immediately jumps to his death because he doesn't have wings and dies. Like you're like, oh,
Yeah, yeah, Glass Power is great. And Glass Power, it's a shame that it ended up being the last thing in this Thousand Worlds universe, but it works. Like I think it works as the last one because it does wrap up a
yeah.
lot of loose ends.
It
You
it
meet a
also
Fendi.
it also explores it also explores the setting of the Thousand Worlds more than any of the others. Maybe, I mean, maybe Dying of the Light because it's so long, but like
Mm.
you feel you're in the Thousand Worlds universe. Tomo and
You meet.
Wahlberg, Claire Namas.
I like how only us like, care about Tomo and Wal. Like if I say Tomo and Wahlberg, 99.9% of the human population be like, what the fuck does that mean? But I'm like, I wish I got to see. I'm so happy I got
Right.
to see Claire Namas and meet him.
Like, you imagine like you, me, and George having lunch and us being like, George, Tomo and Wahlberg, man, you need to do a story on Tomo and Wahlberg, and
What
he'd be
were they
like, I
doing?
don't remember who that is. Like,
George, you got to tell us about their mad dash across the universe. That was their thing, right? They were. Remember when George in oh god in I'm just doing like member berries now. Remember in Dying of Light where there's like a ship called the Mao Zedong that
yeah,
was like a ghost ship just floating around mapping planets and then disappearing again. Oh my god, there's so much like goofy shit that nobody knows about. It's like because like a Song of Ice and Fire has stuff like that. We got like Nimble Dick,
yeah,
but
yeah. And
it
there's a
doesn't.
large number of people that like are huge fans, or like Lord of the Rings, but to take some like random universe that like that even the author has forgotten about and like does not fucking care, and we're sitting
And
there
get
being like
invested.
fucking Tomo and Wahlberg.
We sound like insane people. Oh god.
Um,
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm
so
going.
the road less traveled is this is a screenplay
Mm,
about um if for this is a screenplay about a guy who's having hallucinations about an alternate world, like he's seeing himself if he went to Vietnam and came back and had PTSD, and it's
okay.
him, and so it's like the two versions of himself from two different universes are like seeing each other and having a tough time, like, and then he like reconciles the two souls at the end. um
Mm,
I mean, it's very George R. R. Martin in that it's Vietnam and blended consciousness. It's blended consciousness of yourself. Um, maybe a little bit of time travel, but
Mm.
it's fine. There's nothing
Yeah,
nothing great about it. Shell games. Do you remember Shell games? Oh,
I
Shell
have
games is
no clue which one.
this is um Wild Cards. Shell games is
Oh,
a great and powerful
wild
turtle
card.
story.
I've only read like one or two wild cards. I read the one with like the hound in it because it sounded. You mentioned it and it sounded
Mhm.
interesting to me. Um, for there to be Jewish Israeli skahas.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. Um, the Great and Powerful Turtle. So the Great and Powerful Turtle is interesting in that it is just straight up George. Like it is very clearly just George. Um,
okay.
it's about a kid like grew up in Jersey. Like the personality of the guy is the same like, and um, the way he physically looks. Like we can say these things about like Sam or Quentin, like looking like George, but like
Mm,
this is just like it's just George. Like he's
mm,
from the same place that George is. He acts the same. He looks the same, except he has telekinesis and lives inside a VW bug, and like is a superhero because he can fly around in his VW bug and do his telekinesis. Like that's it.
okay.
And um, his stories like there's one I the one that I bring up a lot is like Winter's Chill, I think it's called, and that's where he wants to have kids with his girlfriend, and he's basically told by Dr. Tachyon that if you do, like your kids are like 99% chance your kids are going to be like will die or be horrific freaks, and he's like fuck, and I've got to like break up with my girlfriend, like, which is a sad tale, but like
Mm.
um I don't know, but it they're fine, but there's nothing I would never recommend to anybody like the wild cards. Like I just be like it's fine. If you're trapped on a plane and a wild cards book was in front of you, go for it, but like otherwise like um
Uh,
the Pear-Shaped Man. Did you read the Pear-Shaped Man?
I kind of a part of me kind of loves Pear-Shaped Man. Is that weird?
Pear-Shaped Man
Where
is like the real like exploration of blended consciousness, like from the perspective. I mean, it's obviously a horror, but like from the perspective of like somebody going through the experience of having their consciousness blended with someone else, like what it
yeah,
would feel like,
and
which is a
I listened to
horror.
like
And yet in Under
I
Siege, the guy was just like, yeah, go for it.
he's like fine. You're right. You're 100% right about that. Where in the span of 2 years, he was like, "All right, this is actually horrific." And yeah, it's creepy. Like the thing is, I think George really, really wants to be a horror writer. Like he loves Lovecraft,
Mm,
and he wants to be like Lovecraft. And I don't actually think George is that good of a horror story writer. He can write scary concept. I don't like because I think of Nightflyers,
yeah,
where
yeah.
he's like highlights that scene with the eyeball and like the
Right.
laser, and he's
And
like, "Oh, that's so scary!" Like, and it's just
right.
not. It's
And
not really that scary.
Nightflyers is like the I mean it's a Final Destination like Friday the 13th slasher film. Like that's all it is, right?
Mm.
Except rather than Jason, it's a telepathic ghost in the computer. Like but nonetheless it's the same. Like everybody, like each character is slowly killed in a gruesome way.
Mm.
Um if only they were killed in an ironic way, it would be more like a horror film. Like the fat woman needed
Yeah,
to be like killed in something that like highlighted the fact that she was a fat slob, or like the whatever
yeah.
the sex addict
The
needs to
kids
be.
having sex or get
Right,
stabbed right through with the spear kind of
right.
thing.
That's the
Yeah.
only thing. But yeah, yeah. I mean, the Pear-Shaped Man is probably his best effort at horror. But
Mm.
but I think it works because it's the horror cerebrally, like it's in him, in his head, like it's not actually like the body horror stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the thing that really sticks out to me is like when the Cheeto puff was in her like underwear drawer or something like that, where
Yeah,
it's like there's something so violating about the mind's like weird telepathy thing, and it violate like the idea of somebody violating your personal private space in your home. Like yeah, I'd say that Pear-Shaped Man was like his best attempt at horror, because it like handles like the creepiness of some stranger in your house, and a
yeah,
creepy fat guy
yeah.
who's
And it
basically
turns
just
out it's
George R. R.
worse.
Martin.
It's worse than someone being in their house, right? He's like
Yeah.
actually in her brain, in her head. Um, what's but here's what's weird. This is gonna like take you out of it.
Okay.
What year did Nightmare on Elm Street come out?
Did it come out this year?
Came
Did it
out in
come out 1987?
84. And so 87, you're in like
Oh.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Nightmare on Elm Street 4.
Oh.
So like once you think about it in like that sense, like Nightmare on Elm Street 3 came out in 83. Like once you came out like in that sense, like, oh, like some creepy dude like invading your dreams, like,
Mm.
oh, it's a little, it's still great. I
He-
think the elements of blended consciousness and like where one person ends and the next person begins. Like I love the ending of Pear-Shaped Man.
mm.
I'm gonna bring up the text here.
It's creepy, yeah. And
Yeah.
I like the switch. The switch happens like so organically. Um
I'm sorry for this gap and like where we're just sitting there being like, oh, I'm looking for
oh
this.
no, I can talk. I can talk. What else
Um,
about Pear-Shaped Man? His apartment's kind of creepy, like how bare bones it is. I don't know. There's all these like little details. I listened to the audiobook version with Roy Dotrice, and he does a really good job of like creepy
ah,
Pear-Shaped Man voice.
this this
Yes.
this was the line. Okay, I remember this line, and it was incredible. Like and I was like, this is a really genius. They were all against her, she knew, looking at their faces. She clutched her briefcase to his chest. That line, I was like, what a
Ooh.
genius fucking line. She clutched her briefcase to his chest. Like, ah, like, I was like, that's so, like, just like of all of the things that you do with a briefcase clutching it to his chest, you know exactly what that is and visualizing it, but like making that like where does she end and he begin? She clutched her briefcase to his chest, and I still remember because it's been, oh my god, it's been like many years since I read this, but I still like knew that line was like, oh, what a fucking great line.
Yeah.
And he goes on with some other ones, but they're not as good as like they'd taken her things. He couldn't remember exactly what, right?
Mm.
He'd taken her things. He couldn't remember exactly what, but they wouldn't get her case. He had stuffed in there and they wouldn't get it. She turned away from them. He was hungry, she realized. Like when do you realize anyone else is hungry, right? She wanted
Mm.
something to eat, but he was hungry. He had half a bag of cheese doodles left. She remembered. He had the bag left. She remembered downstairs. Like,
Mm.
oh, like that confusion is like, anyway, it's pretty good for it. It's his best. Um, Journal of Xavier Desmond is kind of a little bits and pieces. That's the one with the Hound. Um, it's just kind
Yes.
of it's more interesting because it's like George R. R. Martin's take on politics in 1988
Mm.
about the world. The skin trade.
I have
Uh,
not read Skin Trade, so I'm still.
it
I read like
has
a first
so
bit
if
or
if you
something.
read it, you do feel like you're in the writing style of Fever Dream. Like you get these rich characters and this rich environment. It's just not as good of a story. Like it's just
Mm.
like it's got good writing and good characters, but like it's it's yeah, the setting is just like, oh, it's werewolves. Magical
Okay.
werewolves, you know, and you're like,
And
oh,
it doesn't. Does it have like the Fever Dream thing where it's at least an interesting version of werewolves, like that
no, there's nothing like
sci-fi
special, and
vampires?
it's nonsensical. Like you can't really make out like what's going on. There's some like mystical
Oh,
magic dealing with mirrors and stuff, and like, but it doesn't. There's no like laws that can really be like what I say. It's like it's actually magic in the sense that there's no rules. You know, like the
no,
great
I
thing
hate
about
that
Fever
kind of
Dream was
stuff.
that it's actually not a magical world. It's not a fantasy book. It's actually like like the vampires are just a different species of beings, right?
Mhm.
Um, but no, in this they just it's just kind of magic and it's not as interesting because there's no, I don't know. Um, I'd put it at the end of the things that you're looking for to
Dang,
read.
it's weird to see the peter out in the late '80s, early '90s.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Now this is also
doorways at this. Oh wait, oh sorry.
yeah, because he's also, I think he's beginning when he started writing for Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, I didn't include that. I should have included Beauty and the Beast with our buddy Ron Perlman.
I mean, you could have watched the whole thing. It was on the air from 87 to 90. So this is where,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
No,
so
this
he's
is all,
busy, kind of.
well, he starts getting busy. Yeah. And then, um, Doorways. So he starts writing Ice and Fire in 91. Doorways is when he takes the break. Um, and, he doesn't write in like 92. But Doorways is, it's on Amazon Prime for free if you want to watch it. It is
Okay, maybe I'll watch it. My
it's
buddy
not good.
George. Oh, and then I left out all his Twilight Zone episodes too. I should have included those too.
Which one?
Um, the Twilight Zone episodes, like the
Oh, right.
yeah,
He's got
I
one
know.
about a time traveling Elvis impersonator. Um and a few others, but oh, they're actually all
It's like
forgettable. That's
yeah,
I only
yeah,
remember the
yeah.
time traveling Elvis impersonator because there's time travel and I went back, but they're not they're nothing special. There's nothing special actually. Um
Where?
doorways I think like it's not good at all, but it's a little fun to watch because you're going to see a lot of old actors where you're like, oh right, he was in that 70s show, yeah, that guy, you know, or like whatever. um Also, like it's just like it's also kind of funny how bad it is. So at the
Is it sci-fi? What is it? Is it
it
fantasy?
is.
Okay.
It's kind of like Sliders. But so the it's a pilot. So like this woman from this other universe escapes to our universe and universe hops. And from one alternate universe to ours. And then she meets our protagonist who is this like kind of overly nice guy who has a girlfriend who seems to be nice too, but he's also enamored with this woman for some reason, like inexplicably enamored. Like even though the audience is like, "What's special about her?" You know, like, but he's enamored by her, and he wants to protect her. And you know, and these guys from this other parallel universe are hunting her, so they go on the run, and so they then hop to another universe, and in this other universe, um, there's no oil and no gasoline. And
Oh,
so it's a little interesting because there's no plastics, there's no cars, and they kind of explore the universe a little bit, and then at the end they hop to a new universe, and that's it, you know.
okay.
Um, and it's not that there isn't interesting aspects of the show, but like tonally, like there's certain things where I'm just like, how did George R. R. Martin like write that in and not like understand humanity? So at the very beginning, he's like I forget if he's a nurse or a doctor at a hospital, but he's at the hospital and she ends up at the hospital and this police officer is trying to like apprehend her, and so she bites off the police officer's nose,
Oh my God.
and it's played for comedy, like, oh, my
Ew.
nose. And then and the doctor's like, I'm sure someone will have that all stitched up. Let's get you out of here. And then one of the nurses is like, I found it. I found your nose. And it's played as this like lighthearted comedy thing. Like, oh, that character, she bit off somebody's nose. But it's like, in real life, you attack a cop like that, they're fucking putting 100 bullets in you. All right. Like, this isn't like some, like, this is 1991. This isn't like the 1950s or something. This is like, you bite off a cop's nose, you are dead. But also, like, you bit off somebody's nose. Like
Yeah, you
even if they
scarred
get
them
that
for like they're going to be
scar this
scarred.
person for life. Like, this is not a lighthearted thing, but it's played like that's humor. And like,
no, George.
and so I'm just like, what was George thinking? Like, do you not understand humanity, like, at all at this point? Like,
it's kind of like Tough, where like he has a very kind of dark sense of humor where it crosses a line in some areas, like where you're no longer like, you're like, that's not funny, that's horrific. Like,
right,
and I don't find anything funny about that.
Right? How am I supposed to like this character? Like, the protagonist, and keep in mind the protagonist is inexplicably enamored with this woman and wants to protect her, and she's just bitten the nose off of a cop.
Yeah, that's like, and I'm assuming this is one of our main characters, right? Like,
yeah, the character. The show is two people. Like, the show is essentially two people.
Why would I like this character? This is so mean.
Right.
Oh,
and
gosh,
like, and the fact that like our caring character who wants to protect her, like, shouldn't he now be like, oh my god, I've got to deal with this cop,
what a monster, crazy person,
like, nose cut off. It's bad. And the fact that he spent like a good, like, solid year of his life, like, stopping Game of Thrones to like pursue this pilot, and then have the pilot, like, and you know, George looked back on it and he's like, well, you know, who knows if it would have been picked up, or why wasn't it picked up? You know, it's like, there's a clear reason why it wasn't picked up. Okay. It sucked. It really sucked. Anyway.
Oh god, doorways. And then we're getting into Ice and Fire.
Oh, you've got,
but there's one or two stuff.
It's free. It's free on Amazon Prime right now, so you can. It's.
I'll watch it tomorrow.
It's a car wreck. We should do another thing about having just watched it, because it is a car wreck that you should definitely like watch. Like, it is ridiculous. I mean, it'd be one thing if like. Here's the other thing: is like it would be one thing if like the girl were like super hot, but she's not. Like, it's like.
Now I want to see what she looks like. Wait, I'll save it. I'll watch the pilot. I'll watch the pilot and see if she looks like Lysa Tully or something like that. That actress. I love that actress whenever I see her and stuff.
Oh yeah, Kate Dickey.
Yeah. There's just some actors that just look so interesting. Like, they're just weird looking.
Yeah.
Like Alfie Allen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. There's definitely characters like there's sometimes that you've seen The Rock, the movie, like with Nick Cage and Sean Connery.
Yeah.
There's this one villain, and he's got this like really weird square jaw. And like, I'm just like, wow, he just looks so funny and interesting. And I'm just like, what a weird, I mean, this is why he's in acting, because he has such a like memorable face.
Or like the Eamon One-Eye actor, like in his giant ass jaw, like,
yeah. This is him.
Oh my, yeah, look at that. That's like an action figure face,
right? And you're like,
that's
oh
crazy,
God. Right? And you're just like, he's so memorable because he's got this like weird jaw. It was the same, you know, I read an article by the guy who like. Do you remember in Goonies, the guy that has like the big acne scar, like face, pockmarked scars? Like
yeah,
I had an interview with him, and he was like, yeah, I had these acne scars, and then I started getting acting gigs, and I was like, I had enough money to fix my face, but my agent was like, if you fix your face, you're never gonna get work again. And he's like, fuck. So he lived his whole life, and he's like very happy, and he's just like, this is the thing. That like gave me my whole career. Yeah, this is him. because he started getting put in like mob movies and everything, and he just had he had
Oh
these
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Is he on The Sopranos? Maybe. I'm
probably
trying to
yeah.
remember.
But
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
thing
I
is,
recognize his face.
he's like, yeah, I could have had the acne scars dealt with, but what was I gonna do? Um, and
Okay, we
now
got two more. Oh wait,
there's
oh
not many
sorry.
left.
He just does a Song of Ice and Fire, and you can see that the stories are getting further and further apart. Like there's years where he does, yeah, where he was writing like one every, like 5 or 10 every year,
Yeah,
short stories,
and then
and then
this
now
one,
he's
Night
like,
at the Tarnhouse.
maybe the Tarnhouse, one of the
Have you read
last
that one?
short stories he ever wrote. I did write.
Yeah, this is
I
really
like it.
interesting. This is like the last. It's interesting that this is the last short story he's ever written. That is not Ice and Fire.
Mhm.
The last. I mean, yeah, it's past anything because he stopped writing for Wildcards. He edited Wildcards, but he stopped writing for Wildcards. But this is the last thing he ever did that wasn't Ice and Fire, and it's not a bad little story. It takes place in
No,
the
no, the
Jack
characters are
Vance
fun.
universe. Yeah,
It reminds me of the Plague Star in a way where like it introduces all these kind of goofy characters that all are
yeah.
gonna fight, and they all have like their own like weird backstory and hidden motives and gimmicks and stuff. So it's like a fun read, and then it has all these weird creatures and stuff in it.
And then at the end, though, the character that you think is going to survive, like, doesn't, and the character that you thought was going to die off is the only one that survives. And you're like, oh,
Yeah,
that guy's the one that survives. Like, huh?
the guy
Was
with
that
like
expected?
a demon. What does he have? He has like a demon in his ass or something. What? Like a witch cursed him to have a little
Yeah,
goblin in his ass. I
right.
don't remember.
But
Yeah,
you
that's
totally
very
think that the
George R.
Asha
Martin.
Greyjoy, there's an Asha Greyjoy, character, an Asha Greyjoy Arya
Yeah.
character in there, and you're like, oh, she's totally going to be the one that survives. Nope, nope, it's the
No.
weirdo guy.
The weird goblin guy. Yeah, yeah, and it's a lot like the Plague Star where that had a Asha Greyjoy character too, like the Rika Dawnstar, which is like
Yeah, yeah.
almost carbon copy Asha. Yeah. Yeah, Tarnhouse is fun. Tarnhouse is fun. Um it's like his prose is just so good, and then like all the
Hmm.
twists and turns, Maliko the Melancholy, and all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
absolutely. I kind of feel that like he must have been taken to be Makoro or something, or I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see if what's his name's in way when people say that he's in blackface.
Oh God,
Marwin's in blackface.
Marwyn in blackface. Oh jeez. And that's it. I don't think there's anything
Wait,
else.
wait. There's the Elden Ring. I only added this because I got into trouble recently because I made a tweet that got so many people upset. Where I just said that I'm not convinced George R. R. Martin did that much work on Elden Ring, and
I
people
think
were
you're
like,
right. I do think you're right. I
everybody,
guarantee it was like $1 million for him to arrive and talk for like one day. Like he comes in
yeah.
at 9:30 and they're like, "So, come up with something." He's like, "Okay." There's a
It,
tree.
it,
It has people's
I
souls in it. Okay.
I like I've done a bit of like I've played Elden Ring and I know Elden Ring lore and stuff, but I'm not like a huge lore master like how some people are with these games. But like people hated me for it, but I was like, nothing in this really screams George R. R. Martin. Like all these people came out of the woodwork that have never read anything beside, but probably not even read like A Song of Ice and Fire. They probably only watched Game of Thrones, and they're like, "There's dragons and there's magic and witches. Remember, there's witches in A Song of Ice and Fire." And it's
Yeah,
like, did you
yeah.
read the book? Like and I was talking about like how like George really isn't like he doesn't world build like a Tolkien like world, like where there's just like it's very rare for him to like you have like 3 or 4 exceptions where there's like gods, like gods are real and magic is real and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it just like it doesn't feel like George to me. And there's
You're,
only like a
you're you're
couple stuff.
absolutely right. The fact that like in this world there were gods and they were killed off. I can't think besides like the kids are afraid of the dark, like way
and
back.
and and Lonely Songs of Dorian or what Lauren Dorian, whatever his name is.
Even that, I mean, I wouldn't say that like the seven are gods. They're just like some malicious like entities that are after her or something. We're not sure
Right.
what the seven are. But
like I'm just saying it's very rare for George R. R. Martin to have like a pantheon, like a god Tolkien-esque like
yeah,
religion like
absolutely.
pantheon. And people got really upset with me about that. And because like there are some things like the tree, and then some of the bosses' names are very George, where it has like the weird
Right.
letter thing where he switches like a
And
letter
I
around for no
mentioned like
reason.
the festival city, like the abandoned festival city, I think in it is like Croyane or Dying of the Light. But like
Yeah.
that's about it, you know.
There's one thing of like a that's kind of like Royd Eris, the Nightflyers, where like a god has like married a cross gender version of himself and had
Mm,
kids with it, which sounds very like George. But like besides that stuff, like like it just and people have talked about how it just feels like a Dark Souls game that like their
right.
lore, you know.
It's like
Yeah,
how
so
much is another writer one just randomly hitting something, which
right.
happens all the time. Like, oh, you threw incest in a story. Oh, George R. R. Martin is the only person to ever write about incest.
Right.
Like, like obviously there's that. They're just randomly hitting something, but then there's also like people that are going to be fans of George R. R. Martin who might have read something else of George R. R. Martin's who wanted to throw something in that sounded like George R. R. Martin. So like even
Right.
like the festival city, I'm like, did one of the writers like be like, well, what has George R. R. Martin written? Oh, right, he wrote Dying of the Light. Maybe I'll read that. And then
It
he put in a festival city. I don't know, but
Yeah, like it comes off as somebody thinking what George, because we just talked about how like we read almost every single one of George's like body of work, and we
mm,
kind of know how he writes and what he's like as like an author and a writer. Um and it comes off as somebody who hasn't done that. Like they've only seen Game of Thrones or something, and like
mm-hmm.
that's their image of George R. R.
Yeah.
Martin. I did see that the creator of like the Dark Souls series has at least read Fever Dream, like the Japanese game developer. So he's read at
That
least
that
one George R. R. Martin thing.
But
So
that's the really interesting thing about Ice and Fire is because most people that come into Ice and Fire come in from well, I read Wheel of Time and I read Lord of the Rings and I'm really into fantasy stories. And so now I'm going to try A Song of Ice and Fire. And then
mm,
they approach the story from that guise of there's an Aragorn, there's a Rand, and like and
yes,
in these stories there's like gods and things like that. And it's like it's very different from approaching it from, oh right, but also did you maybe consider that this is an atheist hippie who mainly did sci-fi and, and like who thinks about like weird things like feminism and class warfare and Vietnam like constantly like um I often make the joke that George Lucas is actually more similar to George R. R. Martin than George R. R. Martin is to Tolkien. Like
yeah,
because they grew up in the same time period and write on the same themes. And even though one is about spaceships and lightsabers, it's they're still like more social contemporaries. Going through the same experiences.
yeah.
But um, yeah. Elden Ring.
He,
I'm.
Elden, I don't know. It's just like they made such a big deal out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the marketing, and then like when the game opens, like it's literally the first thing you see is like George R. Martin story by George R. Martin, and it's just like nothing in here feels like like to me. I don't know, like
Yeah.
there maybe not nothing. Maybe that's where I
What's
catch
weird is,
myself.
but
Where
also like if you see interviews, if you watch any interviews with George, he says, I did that years ago and I forgot about it. I forgot what I did. So I don't know what it was. And these video
yeah,
games, they take a long time to produce. So I like wrote some stuff. And then like 6 years later, this game came out. And it's like you don't remember it. You can't like like what did he say? Like what did he write? Did
right.
was it like 2 pages? Was it 20 pages? Like what did he provide them? And how did he
Like it's
forget it to the point where he clearly was uncomfortable talking about it in an interview because he didn't want to mess something up or he doesn't have much memory about it.
yeah, like whatever he did. was minimal, and like I feel like in the final product, like there's no feel of George R. Martin. Like I don't know, we talk about like George has very specific stuff where it's like he's good at endings and twist endings
Hmm.
and
Oh yeah,
unlikely protagonists and I don't know all kinds of stuff. Like I don't know, he has all these themes, and yeah, Elden Ring doesn't feel like it has much of that, like if any. Like because
yeah,
people have really made stretches where like, well, the most powerful boss in the game is a woman, so and it shows that George R. Martin's a feminist and he likes female characters. So like it's really
right,
really like I
right.
got ratioed by people on Twitter that were like
There's
really
also
stretching it.
like some people brought up that like there's a lot of existential themes in that, and
Eh,
even George, like the idea of like I think like what they kill the gods and then like take over for as themselves, and one could say like, oh, that's similar to Bran, for example, maybe like killing the werewood net, killing the gods, and then ruling himself. Or I haven't played Elden Ring, but I don't know if that's like, isn't
hmm.
that like one of the endings or something?
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely like a theme in there. Yeah,
You know, but at the same time, like that's also like people that know nothing about Nietzsche know his one quote, God is dead, which is that. So like anybody putting in existential themes like would stumble upon that too. So I don't know.
yeah, and
Like
the other Dark Souls games have those themes, and the world feels like a Dark Souls world. Like I don't know how much George R. Martin would have influenced the game development team, seeing that they've already done. You know, like
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's my 2 cents on Elden Ring. I don't think he actually did that much work on it,
All
and people
right.
get very upset at me for saying it, but I think it's
You
true.
you
I
you are
stand my ground.
ratioed. You are ratioed.
Oh god, and then at the end here, I'm sorry for keeping you so long. I didn't mean for it to go this long,
Oh no, this is
but
great. This is great. I just
unfinished, unfinished. People don't know this, but Winds of Winter is not the first unfinished
oh
story George
yeah,
R.
that's
Martin did.
right.
I didn't even know
Avalon. What
about
is this
freaking
black and white and red all over?
I didn't know somebody on a blog brought it up that it's a in Dream Song George brings it up that it was like a gap of time in I guess the 1980s where he was working on this ambitious novel black white and red all over. I literally don't know what it's about. I'll look into it. um and it was like too ambitious and it was too long and clunky, like he had three-fourths of it done or something like that. And then he needed money, so he churned out something that was short and could make a quick profit. So and they never came back to it.
Huh. I bet you know
Let me
what's
see.
funny about both black and white and red all over in Avalon is I bet there's like so much stuff that's like taken and recycled into Ice and Fire that we'll never find out.
They will never know. We'll be
That we'll
like,
never
yeah,
know,
because
right?
Avalon, the setting of Avalon sounds like it's gonna be the Winds of Winter Maester plot, like Old Town plot. Because Avalon is basically Old Town of space, right? It's where like the Space Academy and all the knowledge
That's
is,
right. Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
and it was gonna be set there. And yeah, it's I oh my god, like he's lucky he never
Which
published
is
that.
what Windhaven is too, by the way. I don't know if you know
Oh
like
shoot, really?
well, yeah, Windhaven you should definitely read Windhaven sometime. But because it's
Okay.
co-written with Lisa Tuttle, it's a much
Hmm.
more inspiring story. It's a it's a nice story. But the main character is Maris, which in case like
Oh, like
pretty
Pretty
Maris,
Mary.
yeah, and all sorts of Marises. Um, and various places like the Erie are in the story and stuff like that. And there's an academy where people learn how to fly. It's about civilization going from being inheritance based to meritocracy. And there's a Sorella who's
Oh.
clearly the same character as Sorella Sand. Like she's like the star of the academy who is like dark skinned and from the south. Yeah,
So he didn't
but
even change the name
well,
because
Sorella is S apostrophe Rella.
oh, it's like
Um,
Suthlum. It's like his stupid Thousand Worlds names. Oh.
I know, right? But you should. I should send you if I can find Windhaven. I should send it to you.
Yeah,
It's
I
you
couldn't
should
find
definitely read
Windhaven.
Windhaven. You'll
Okay.
because it's just like there's just so many mentions as well to be like, oh my god, really? Like the Erie? Like you're yes, you know. But yeah,
Okay.
it definitely does not have the same George R. R. Martin feel thematically because it's a Lisa Tuttle story, but like there's elements like the prose is very George R. R. Martin, but like the story is very hope filled.
Hmm. Okay, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I looked up Black and White and Red All Over. It consists of a large fragment of unfinished novel, set in the 1890s and based on Jack the Ripper. Oh, it
Oh.
says, in summer 1985, it became clear that I no longer had luxury. The bills are mounting up. I had a mortgage to pay. There's no way to going to finish Black, White, and Red All Over quickly enough. Um, 200 pages I had written. Maybe it wasn't that finished. Yeah, so I think it's preserved. I think you can actually read partial of it. But yeah,
Oh,
it sounds like it's kind of
if we
like a
go to the
fever
library, the
dream.
Cushing Library.
It's like fever dream. It sounds like it probably was like fever dream where it was like his deep dive into like a historical
Yeah,
event.
yeah.
Because that's the thing about George is like he loves history, but he hasn't written that much historical fiction. Like it would be
But
this and fever dream,
you know,
kind of.
the thing about his writing though, when you think about the novels, I mean, I think about Fever Dream, Armageddon Rag, Dying of the Light, is they are kind of like meandering novels that all of a sudden end. Um,
Yes.
and you know, outside of short stories, he does kind of have a weird pacing problem where like he's just kind of writing in the world, like exploring the world, and then all of a sudden decides, oh, I fucking need to end this shit. And it's like all of a sudden you're like, whoa. Um, and so you know, I think
You're
I think that's
100% right.
yeah, I think that's maybe a problem with like why other books might go unfinished. Like, you know, like he doesn't know how to
Uh,
end them or doesn't know where it's going. And he can't
mm.
yet just end it, but he doesn't know what else to do. I don't know.
You,
Uh,
Preston, you got to do a fan fiction project for Avalon where
oh,
like the twist is there's a secret Harangan mind underneath the Academy building
one
or
day
something stupid.
after a dream of spring, I'll finish the Thousand Worlds. All right. Well,
Yes.
Trey,
Okay.
we've talked about this for over 2 hours, so
No, I'm so sorry. I didn't
no
think it would
worries,
be
no
this long.
worries.
I'm sorry to go through every single story. Oh
All right,
God.
sounds good. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you next time. All right.